Hey, it's Renee with Reset with Renee. Welcome back to another podcast episode. Today, I want to talk about some common mistakes that people and especially my clients make. So, what I encourage you to think about now is maybe a relationship difficulty or challenge that you've had. It could be the same kind of relationship challenge that repeats a pattern, a cycle. It could be one that repeats across different people you know, or it could be just something you see come up in a particular relationship. So, most folks talk to me about the relationships with their partner, romantic partners, with their friends, with their children. And people at work. So those are some buckets you might think about as I talk about some of the common mistakes that people make. Um, and so I think it's timely that I'm doing this on December 19th. A lot of folks just spent Thanksgiving with their relatives. They may be approaching another round for Christmas or New Year's. And so I specialize in working with folks with CPTSD. So that's complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And the way that I explain that is if you grew up with caregivers who weren't exactly attuned to you, which is a lot of people, and you also had some emotional neglect or abuse of some kind. So you have childhood abuse and neglect plus secondary adult trauma. That's how most people end up with resonating with the CPTSD label. So I just think it's helpful to understand what that is. And to me, it's a shortcut to say, I've lived through some shit. I've been through a lot and I'm working through it, and or I help other people get through it. So that's the layup about CPTSD. And so what people do is if they are not having a reciprocal relationship, a conscious relationship based on equal power, then they'll end up in a power struggle. And when you end up in a power struggle, there's bound to be someone who feels like a winner and someone who feels like a loser. Okay. And so when that's happening, I would bet my bottom dollar that at least one of those people has some feelings or parts of them that feel hurt, feel loss, feel grief, and they also have some protective parts of them that are trying not to feel that hurt, are trying to prevent that hurt from growing or being activated again. And so this is where folks mess up. They enter into relationship dynamics, conversations, conflict repair, whatever it is. And they engage then from the hurt part of them or the protective part of them, but not from their true self. And that's a setup for repeated failure. And it's something I see again and again. In my job, the way that I think about it, part of what I do is I'm a detective for patterns. So when I work with folks, whether it's one-on-one clients in coaching or therapy, or it's like a group coaching situation, it's like, okay, what part of that person just led and what part in the other person got activated? So like, what's the parts dynamic inside person A, and then what's the parts dynamic inside person B, and then what's happening interpersonally between the two. So that's a lot to track. I know. So if you work with me, one of the things that I do is just really put that detective hat back on and really pay attention to what parts you are sharing with me as you talk about some of your most important relationships. So if you do this, I want you to know it doesn't mean you have CPTSD. It's just a super common dynamic that happens in unconscious relationships. For folks who do have CPTSD, it is super amplified for them, the hurt and the protective parts. And this is because they've often grown up and experienced on repeat being projected upon, being gaslit, lied to, betrayed, abandoned, shocked. So all of this like relational shock trauma. And then after that, they have the second wound of being judged by themselves and by others for not maintaining or having close connections with the exact same people who dumped on them. So it's really a double bind for CPTSD survivors. So like to get through the hurt, to unwind the protective parts, to get to your true self so that you can show up in embodied and personal power kind of way with folks, it's a process. So that's why I'm talking about this. Several of my clients have been talking about their struggle internally and externally with being with family over the holidays, what it's bringing up for them, what the challenges are, what the obstacles are, and trying to pregame with their coping strategies. So, so I want to share with you why leading from your hurt parts and your protective parts doesn't work. Hurt energy, when we've experienced it, it's not comfortable, and our culture teaches us to avoid it. And if you had caretakers or caregivers who weren't comfortable with their own emotions, they probably modeled for you how to stuff them down or to put on a smile and just keep going. So many people, even those who don't have CPTSD, really struggle with connecting with hurt energy. And so oftentimes they need a guide or a bridge, someone to help them be with it. And that counts for healers too. There's a lot of healers, including myself, that it helps us to have a compassionate witness and someone who has the conviction to be like, yep, stick with it. Stick with it. It's worth it. So that's what I do with my work with clients. And so if you're in your hurt energy, okay, it's really disempowered. You've been victimized, you felt hurt. Feeling hurt is understandable, but if you make decisions and you relate from that place with a person who's not conscious, who's not ready to receive your hurt, who's not able or has the capacity to receive your hurt, you're going to get hurt again. Okay? So you do need to utilize some discernment in seeing how people near you, people that you're in close proximity with, how they receive input. Do they take it in? Are they open? Are they defensive? Do they deflect? Do they devalue? Do they ask follow-up questions to understand more? Those are helpful data points to decide how you may have expectations that are setting you up for disappointment or not. Okay. So if you have someone who is not conscious and doesn't want to hear that they have had a part in hurting someone, okay, and then you have that person who's trying to share their hurt, what you're going to see is most likely the unconscious person is going to try to power over the hurt person to maintain control and to protect their own hurt and vulnerable parts that they're not connected to. And so what you'll see is a lot of projecting onto the hurt person. And so for folks with CPTSD or any kind of relational trauma, this then causes like a third wound around the hurt. It's like I got hurt to begin with, haven't been witnessed, received, held, supported at all. So there's the second, and now you just dumped another round on me of projection and deflection. So that's not a win-win for either party, actually, because the person who does that power over to maintain control and protect their own hurt, they're not having close relationships. They don't know how to do conflict resolution. And so they're missing out on intimacy and connection. And I could say a lot about that. I have in other places. So, like I said, it's a huge block to relationship success and healing, because then really all that those two people have is a ginormous power struggle. And without the repair, following a rupture, there's not a reciprocal relationship based on pure personal power. And when I say pure personal power, I mean each person feels their personal power, has embodied boundaries, has clear intentions, they take aligned actions, they're co-creating something together. A lot of variables, a lot of moving parts. But those are some of the ingredients that help you have healthy, conscious relationships. So to repair a rupture, you really do need someone who has the capacity to listen, to witness, to hold, and to attune, to be present and to pay attention with empathy and care. It's repairing attachment ruptures. That's what's required. So, because it can be really challenging, and for folks with CPTSD, when they've had for instance, their caregivers, their parents, do these sorts of things where they devalue, they deflect, they project. They've probably then developed an autonomic nervous system reaction or protective mechanism to keep them from feeling more hurt. So that's superhuman. No shame. Our autonomic nervous system was created forever ago, and it's there to protect us. It's super smart for times when we're in stress and when we're having relationship conflict. It's stress. So what I see often for men and women is really going into one of the 4 F's of the nervous system. So fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. So if you know someone who shuts down, they can't find their words, they're freezing. If you know someone, or if you are that person who just storms out the room or does a silent treatment, that's flight. If it's someone who's duking it out with you verbally or physically, that's fight. And then fawn is one of the other really common ones. And that's sort of like go along to get along. Like, I'm not going to create any more conflict on top of what's there. And I'm doing that because I'd rather have my attachment to the person at the cost of my authentic truth. And I cannot say enough about how important it is to have both, to be authentically you in a relationship with a safe attachment figure, no matter what your age. So that's what, when people fawn, they're doing it to protect themselves, and to protect that relationship or attachment. So many people on a healing journey, that's for sure my folks with CPTSD, they've got to work with their tendency to shut down and go silent, to censor, to people please, and to avoid conflict. And again, I'm going to emphasize, for some of these folks, it's not weak, it's smart, intuitive, and it's for their safety, especially if they're dealing with someone who's into coercive control. So the other piece to that, though, is for folks who feel like the victim, the folks that are holding all that hurt, what can sometimes happen is that they get out of that helpless position of the fawn response where they're collapsing. And what they do instead is flip. And they get tired of being the loser and they want to have a taste of being the winner. So they'll flip, and they'll try to power over. And so it just keeps both people in a power struggle. It's not going to work. So someone in that dynamic, just one person, has to be the one to make the first move. What I mean by that, to make the first move, is like, be regulated, have capacity, have emotional skills, be able to regroup when things start getting a little wobbly or crunchy or zingy. And so they then can stay in that place of self-energy. And for those of you who follow me for a while or know that I'm into IFS, internal family systems, there are 8 C words that kind of mark the space and state of self-energy. So you can look those up. But calm, compassionate, creative, connected, clear are some of the ones that come to mind right now. I usually miss a few. So if you're not in that C energy, that means you're either blended with a hurt part of you or you're blended with a protective part of you. You'll know if you're blended with a hurt part because literally your internal languaging or your body, think or feel, I hurt. It hurts. You'll know you're in protective part energy if you have some languaging or strategies that coincide with the following phrases. I must. Like, I must is a real driven, like, I gotta make it happen. I can't. I can't is like, I can't. Collapse. I'm helpless. I don't have it in me. It's too hard. I don't have it. I won't. Like, talk to the hand. Don't even go there. Leave me out of it. And then the even darker and zingier one would be, I will destroy. I'll show you. Meaning, like, I'm going to win at any cost. So if you lead with the I hurt or any of those flavors or frequencies or of the protective parts, you are predictably going to trigger the other person's hurt and the other person's protective parts. And then you'll be off to the races of a parts battle and a power struggle. And so if you're observing, like if you're in the position of therapist or coach, or you're a child in the room or fly on the wall, you're just seeing someone attack and then someone defend and attack back, and then someone defend and attack back. And there's no resolution, there's no repair. And that's not what we want. So the solution is you want to exit the power struggle. No one wins when you're in a power struggle. There's a lot of information out there about this power dynamic of perpetrator, victim, and rescuer. And that if you are, and you'll see a triangle. And in fact, if you look at my blog on the Reset with Renee website, there's a link where you can read more about this triangle. But if you're anywhere on that triangle as perpetrator, victim, or rescuer, you're in a power struggle. And so you want to get out of that role. You want to get out of that position. And that's what I teach my clients to do, to move from victim, I hurt, not lead with protective part energy, but instead to lead with empowered, pure self energy and embodied boundaries for the people, places, and things that require embodied boundaries versus protective part led boundaries, which tend to be talk to the hand, very impenetrable. It doesn't send a pure, clean message of I'm available and I want to make this better. So a lot of folks, when they don't know how to do embodied boundaries, but try, they'll have protector part led boundaries and they fail, and then they collapse and say, I can't do this anymore. And then they're back to fawning or doing whatever they've done to cope with a hard relationship. So you want to get off that triangle. You want to get out of the power struggle. That's solution one. Solution two is to do something I'm always saying, and that is to connect inside. Apology, repair, resolution, that's what we want. We don't always get it. And especially with really tricky people, perhaps your parents. So you may not ever get that apology. You may not ever get that repair. And if you wait for it, or justice even, you're going to be waiting a long time and hurting for a long time. And I say, own your power, own your story. You connect with the hurt. You are the person who knows the most about that hurt injury. You know who did it most of the time. You know how and when it happened. You know how many times it's happened, what the story is. You may not know. Sometimes our hurts are pre-verbal, so it may be a body memory or a body flashback, but you'll know when it's happening, when it's been activated. And so a lot of times healing is really done solo in the privacy of your own home or wherever you feel safe and comfortable, where you can take that space to connect internally with the hurt. And sometimes you can't do that until you've been led. And that's where therapy and coaching containers, and other activating experiences come in to help you access the hurt, because oftentimes we bury it. So you need to get to it, and there's not a roadmap. And then once you get there, it can be overwhelming because you've never dealt with it before, and parts of you are freaking out going, I don't know what to do. And so having someone who has done that work and knows how to do it and to hold space helps you bridge until you get to the point where you have the skill set to go there, hold it, meet it, honor it, tend to it on your own. So as you connect with your hurt, you'll also be connecting with the protective parts of you who've probably been trying to protect you in specific ways, probably for decades. And you update them and let them know, hey, I know you started doing this when I was 5, but I'm 55. And thank you for your years of service. I'd like you to back off a little bit. I'm here to do things differently. And sometimes parts of us are like, awesome, yay, I've been waiting, where you been? Sometimes they're pissed off, and sometimes they don't want to even talk. And so if you've had some very active protective parts for most of your life, you may be met by several of them, and they may have a variety of responses. And that can be hard for people, especially with folks with CPTSD, because they have so many protective parts. I want to normalize that. If you have CPTSD, you're going to have a whole community of protective parts and a whole community of hurt parts. And that's why it's fucking complex. Okay, so it does help to have someone walk you through all of that. And so step number 2, you guys, is really about attunement with yourself, to yourself, within yourself, and doing the relational attachment repair work that I was referencing as interpersonal between two people. It really becomes interpersonal healing work, where you show up for those hurt parts of you in the way that you wish someone would have back when they first got hurt. So you know the medicine for that hurt more than anybody else. And that's powerful. So number 3, just some words I love that I've learned from my mentor and I share with others. And that's in relationship dynamics, set an intention, which means you're not going to get your sense of okayness hung up on an outcome. Like, am I approved of? Am I loved enough? Like, am I affirmed and validated enough? You want that in your relationships, but if your sense of okayness is dependent upon that, that's a setup for failure. So it's more powerful to set your intention for how you want to be in relationship with yourself and with others. And then from that place, align your actions and your choices. And then determine, and this is often a process, how to embody your boundaries. Because once you know who you are, once you know what you're about, what you're going to put your time and energy into, and what you're not, when you can assess and discern who has capacity and capability to co-create a conscious relationship with you, you don't even have to say anything. You're just living it. So that's what we're shooting for. And that is a process as well. Okay. So I do want to remind you, try not to take things personally. I know when you hurt, it's almost impossible not to take it personally. It hurts. That is personal. And yet other people's choices and behaviors is a reflection of their capacity, their skill sets, their hurt parts, their protective parts, their attachment wounds, or the lack thereof. Okay. So if they're skillful, you're probably not thinking about them right now. You're probably thinking about someone who's not as skillful and not as powerful in a way that is good power, pure power. So we want you to retain your personal power no matter what, and avoid feeding the drama cycle or the power struggle. So it's really learning how to become responsive instead of reactive. And so the 4th point I want to make in terms of the solution is, for difficult or challenging, tricky, traumatic, however you want to frame that up, for people who have really tricky protective parts, that's the best way to say it, you want to consider maybe deepening your understanding of energetic stewardship. So it's like, what am I available for? What am I not available for? What about this interaction do I want to absorb and take in, and what is not for me? I'm not going to cuddle and snuggle with it. I'm going to reflect that energetically back. What is going well that I want to amplify, strengthen, and grow inside of me for the other person, what we're co-creating. And so there's other ways that you can energetically work with yourself and other people within a relationship context. So here's a little plug. In September, the class I'm offering in the Portal program is all on energetic stewardship. So if you're on IG, Instagram, I encourage you to go there, check out some of my posts, look at the Linktree link in the bio. where you can see descriptions of 3 different programs. I'll talk about that in a second and how to purchase them. So, in some, I work with people who, like me, don't want to cause hurt or harm and also don't want to be on the receiving end of hurt and harm. And so, really, discernment is one of the best skills you can refine. And then the other piece I want to say is that hurt is often covered by crunchy, zingy stuff like anger, resentment, and bitterness. So as I'm saying that, I'm thinking of times I've been in that space and some of the clients I've had conversations with lately who they don't want to cut off relationships. They don't want to go no contact, or they've gone no contact, but they think about what are they teaching the next generation, or what's the impact, or is it okay? Like they don't want to regret. And yet it's like so hard to move forward with anger, resentment, and bitterness. And that's often because the hurt is there and the hurt's continuing to happen because we don't have the personal power yet. So that's something that I work on with my clients. And I want to normalize it can be a process to meet and feel your hurt. So for folks who've had a trauma history, for folks who've had repeated relational trauma, they did probably bury that hurt. And so it takes what I call the archaeological dig to get down. And so what you see on the surface, the anger, the bitterness, the judgment, the blaming, the shaming, that's protective part stuff you see on the surface. And so when you see that, know that there's a wound that's in there. It's probably big, it's probably deep, and it's probably buried deep. So yeah, it does take some help to get there, and it does take some time to get there. And everybody has their own path for getting there. I've played with a lot and found some that work for me, and I like to help others play with the ones I know about, and we co-create what works for them, the path to their own healing and their own medicine. Let's see if I've covered everything here. Yeah, archaeological dig, I mentioned that. That's to connect with the hurt and to update and relieve those protective parts so that they can feel free to be how they were designed originally to be. And to connect inside is a major undertaking of 3 C words, self-energetic words: courage. It takes courage to just show up for stuff inside of you you've avoided for months, years, or likely decades, or that it's been avoided in your family tree for generations. That is some fucking courage. That is some cycle breaking stuff. And then compassion. A lot of CPTSD survivors are hard on themselves. They have had to develop a super strong inner critic to keep themselves in check so that they're safe. So that doesn't leave once they grow up, and once they leave an unsafe situation, usually that harsh inner critic stays with them. And so to bring grace and compassion in is like a huge win. And then conviction. When you have protective parts of you who've protected you because no one else was there to protect you, and they've been doing that job for years and decades, they don't automatically give up their job, nor should they, because they need to develop more trust in your self-energetic leadership. And that's a process and a journey, and that's something I help my clients with. So for a lot of folks, good enough is symptom management. I feel less angry. I feel less sad. I feel less anxious. My relationship's good enough. The bad stuff is gone. It's just, I can maintain. That's pretty good if you have a CPTSD history. But what we want is like good, better, best, excellent. And so I mean that in an encouraging way, not in a way that creates distance about where you are and where you want to be. So what we really want, so I'll say this is the best, is like for you to be in self-leadership, inhabit those 8 C words, know how to reference that. Like really think about this. When was the last time you felt calm? When was the last time you conveyed compassion internally or externally? When were you last confident? Who were you the most connected with? And so some of my clients start with a big fat, I've got nothing. And so we've got to kind of work a different way to find the self energy. And sometimes we got to start with working with source energy and then building both up energetically before we can help hurt parts, our protective parts. And that's not what people often want when they first come to see me. They really want to just feel better. They want to fix it. Can you relate? So we want the self leadership that is identified, resource anchored in one love. So that's knowing, hey, at the end of the day, I've got this heart and this body. It's connected to my mind, my spirit. I'm holistic. I'm connected. I'm powerful. And I'm bringing that into my relationships. So I said I'd end with talking about the programs. If this intrigues you, if you are a cycle breaker, if you are trying to change the generational story in your family tree, if you are in recovery from relational abuse, if you have CPTSD, you already know, like you've read The Body Keeps Score or any of the other books that are out there that help people see, oh, that's what that was. Oh, that's a trauma bond. Oh, all my basic needs were met, but I never had attunement with my caregivers. Oh, that's emotional neglect. Like, not to ding dong, blame or shame our caregivers, but like it leaves an imprint. So you couldn't fix it or address it then, but you can now, and that's the invitation. So 2024, I'm going to continue to offer therapy in the 2 states I'm licensed, and that would be Missouri and Arkansas. I'm going to continue to offer one-on-one life coaching sessions. If you're a CPTSD survivor, I would encourage you to consider, after we work together, or if we've already worked together, doing a 90-minute session, an extended session, for a little bit more room to move in what we do. And if you're not interested in being a client, or maybe you already are one, or you want to just expand and amplify your personal work, your healing, your growth, your recovery, then consider some of the programs that I have in my link tree. The All Access is the Reset Collective. It is 12 months. I think it's like 36 meetings with me. Granted, group context, but I got to plug the group context. I've been in 2 coaching containers this past year. They were each 10 months long. I've re-upped in one of them. And you do learn from hearing participants' questions, stories, reactions. And so it's really a wonderful opportunity to know you're not alone, to hear how other people have journeyed and to see people who've gotten to the other side, to be able to reflect on where you once were. So there's a lot of benefit to having community. There's a lot of value to that. So that's what I offer in the Reset Collective. There's a teaching component. There's a second meeting where we practice or have an experiential. We play with that concept. So it's not just up here in your mind, but it's something you begin to practice and work towards integrating. And then there's a third meeting, which is a monthly question and answer group coaching call. On top of that, you'll get access to a Facebook community where you can connect with other folks who are on the journey. So that is the Reset Collective, 12 months. If you don't want to go all in for 12 months, there's an option to do Pathways, which is the same stuff, only it's opting in and out on a quarterly basis. So Q1 will be January, February, March. Pathways, they aren't going to get bonuses, handouts, and some of the extras that the collective likely will. So like earlier this week, I was thinking about something I want to teach that's not on the schedule. I'm like, yep, the collective's going to get that first. So that might help you make up your mind there. And then if you're not for the quarterly or the yearly, the teaching component, whatever topic I'm going to do, not the experiential, not the question and answer, just the teaching topic, you can opt to pay as you go within the Portals program on my link tree. So I hope you'll check that out. If you have any questions, I invite you to reach out and let me know. And I genuinely, from my heart, hope this has been helpful for you to think about your inner system. How connected to self are you? Those C words, look them up if you have to. IFS and the 8 C's. There's also 5 P's. There's a couple other acronyms, but 8 C's are the most popular. Do a self check. How am I doing with being in self energy? And how can I do better at it? And then what are my relationships like? Are they feeling like a conscious co-creation, or is it feeling like a power struggle? Am I leading with hurt parts? Am I leading with protective parts? And do I feel a connection to my parts? Because that's always your starting point to come to know yourself more. That's intimacy. I hate it. It's like a pet peeve when people talk about intimacy and they refer to it as like sexual intimacy. I'm like, yeah, intimacy is a little bit more than that. Like, it's into me, I see. Therefore, I can be vulnerable with you and share that with you if I discern that you're a person who has the capacity and desire to receive my intimacy and vulnerability. So I could go on and on, but I want to thank you for joining me for this episode of Reset with Renee, and I hope you'll join me back again another time. Take care.